Hello, I'm Dean Otto. I'm the curator of film at the Speed Art Museum. And I want to thank you for joining us in today's discussion of The Fight, a new documentary on the tireless work of the attorneys for the ACLU. This program is being co-presented with the ACLU of Kentucky. This program and the run of the film on the Speed's virtual cinema is being supported by the Ona and Ernest Marshall Fund. And I especially want to thank Ona for bringing this film to my attention before its world premiere at the Sundance Film Festival. One of the goals of the Speed Cinema is to use film to build a stronger community. And this film helps us to connect with the important work of the ACLU and particularly the work that they're doing around reproductive freedom here in Kentucky. Today we have Brigitte Amiri, who is the Deputy Director of the ACLU's Reproductive Freedom Project, who is prominently featured in the film. She's also been very active in working with the ACLU of Kentucky, particularly with Heather Gatnarek, the ACLU's staff attorney. And we're thankful for Brigitte for this for working this half-hour program into her schedule. And during the discussion, audience members will be muted, but we'll have time for a few questions at the end. So please submit your questions through the chat function at the bottom of the screen. So I'd like to invite Heather to take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Dean. And Brigitte, thank you so much for joining us today and for answering some of our questions. It's always great to see you, of course. I wanted to start with a first question. So some folks who are joining us will have already seen The Fight, and I think someone in the chat already indicated that they had. And others might be watching a recording of this after they've finished watching the film. Some folks may not have seen the film yet. Can you briefly introduce for us and refresh for folks the case that you're featured on, Garza v. Hargan?
Sure, and thanks, Heather, and thank you to Dean and the Speed Art Museum and Dr. and Ona Marshall and everyone at EMW Women's Surgical Center. I really wish that we could be there in person. I've spent a lot of time in Louisville working on cases with the ACLU of Kentucky and EMW over the last 3 years, and it really would have been special to be there in person. So thank you to everyone there for hosting this and hosting the film. So the film follows 4 ACLU cases in our battle against the Trump administration's attack on civil liberties. And the case that I work on in the film is the case of Jane Doe. And it's a case involving an unaccompanied immigrant minor, a 17-year-old who traveled to the United States without her parents, fleeing abuse in her home country. And she discovers she's pregnant when she's in a government-funded shelter. She asks for an abortion, and the Trump administration says that she is prohibited from leaving the shelter for any abortion-related appointment and cannot get the abortion that she seeks. So we have to rush into court, and we have to do everything that we can while the clock is ticking. She's in a shelter in Texas, and Texas bans abortion at 20 weeks in pregnancy. And she's 9 weeks when she first makes the request, and the government fights us tooth and nail in court, and we hit some roadblocks in court. I don't know that if the spoiler alerts are loud, including by a panel of judges led by then Judge Kavanaugh. And eventually we are successful in obtaining an abortion for her. And we go on to represent a number of young women. And also she leads a class action to make sure that the government can never do this again. And I just want to lift up her courage and her bravery in fighting the Trump administration during all of this as well.
Now, as a follow-up, can you tell us first the status of the case of the class action currently? And then secondly, there were some procedural aspects of that case that didn't make their way into the film. You were saying that, they probably could have made an entire film just about this case for all of the nonsense the government put you all through. But can you tell us a little bit about the procedural history of the case after the circuit level and in particular, the government's taking this case up to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, so the procedural history, if there are any law nerds out there, was really complicated, and we were often battling in the district court and the Court of Appeals at the same time, both on behalf of individual young women and then on behalf of a class trying to block the policy for everybody. And so we were really operating on multiple levels at different times, but what Heather is specifically referring to is 9 days after we were able to get Jane Doe the abortion, the Trump administration, led by the Solicitor General, Noel Francisco at the time, filed a cert petition in the Supreme Court trying to not only vacate our victory, but also to try to hold myself and my team members to sanction us. They wanted the Supreme Court to say that we violated ethical procedures by getting Jane a timely abortion. And obviously that was nonsense, but it was classic Trump administration tactics, is that if someone wins, if someone dares to oppose you, you hit them with false accusations about their character, their ethics, etc. And I'm very fortunate to work at the ACLU, where we have a large megaphone and a lot of ability to stand up to this type of nonsense. But we had to fight in the Supreme Court about whether myself and my colleagues should face discipline because of our role in the Jane Doe case. But I will say that they were not successful. The Supreme Court did not find any wrongdoing on my behalf or my team's behalf, and we proceeded with the case. And where it stands now is that for all pregnant unaccompanied immigrant minors, the government may not obstruct or interfere with access to abortion. And we are back in the district court, and the government has actually proposed a revised policy that largely tracks our preliminary injunction, and we are talking about whether that resolves the case or not.
That's wonderful to hear. And of course, we're all glad that you weren't sanctioned.
Me too.
Now, this is not a spoiler for folks who haven't yet seen the film, but at the end, we see an update that references the ACLU's work on other attempts to block access to abortion. And of course, that's where our working relationship lies. Can you talk about the partnership between the ACLU of Kentucky and your office, the ACLU Reproductive Freedom Project, in recent years?
Yes, and EMW too, right? So the ACLU and the ACLU of Kentucky, we have the great honor and great fortune of representing EMW Women's Surgical Center, and have for decades. And in the last 3 years, we've been quite busy. So when Governor Bevin was elected in 2015, he made it his personal mission to close abortion clinics in Kentucky. And he did everything that he could. And the legislature has also been doing everything it can to also close clinics. And so I think over the last 3 years or so, we've had, I think, 5 cases at one time going on, challenging different abortion restrictions and different attempts to try to close EMW. Where the film leaves off is that we were getting ready to run into court to block the 6-week abortion ban, and the ban based on the reasons that a person is seeking abortion. And so that was the latest attempt by the legislature to try to ban abortion in Kentucky, or push it out of reach for people who need it. And luckily we have that law blocked, and we're in the progress of that case, and have our other cases pending, about which we're happy to talk about more. But it's been busy in Kentucky, and just huge appreciation for ACLU Kentucky and everyone at EMW who has been fighting, and the whole infrastructure of people who work with EMW, just the amazing volunteers, the abortion funds. It's just such a wonderful community of people who do everything that they can to make sure that people get the care that they need in Louisville.
Yeah, I echo that, of course. And I think one thing that makes this work, well, a lot of things make this work very interesting. But one of the things that makes this work maybe a little different from the other types of cases that the ACLU of Kentucky works on is that so many of these cases in the last 3 years have been, of course, on the defensive against a hostile government, but also requiring quite quick action. I think sometimes when we think about ACLU cases, we think more of the type of civil liberties challenges that you can work up over time and get the case, in a position where you're ready to bring it, or, where you feel comfortable and you have all the facts developed. But in the cases that you and I have worked on together, that's simply not the case, because over the last 3 years, the laws that came out of our General Assembly were passed with emergency clauses, which means they would take effect immediately upon the governor's signature. We all knew that the governor was going to sign each and every one of these laws. So we all, and it's a large team of people, had to be ready to go to court right away to seek an injunction in order to stop the laws from going into effect, and therefore allow EMW to continue caring for patients. So that is definitely something that just feels to me so different than the other cases I work on, because, we're in touch nonstop during the legislative session. I think the folks up in New York are as tuned into the Kentucky General Assembly as we all are on the ground here. And it is a, sort of the most, I guess, rapid response type of case that we tend to work on. And so, I say all that just so that folks have a little bit of context, but also to say, of course, thank you so much to you and all of your colleagues that we work with who are available to us in those moments of need, a need for quick action. I think my final question for you, and then I know we've got some questions already from audience members here. My third question for you is, there's such mixed news on the national and state level fronts on all aspects of reproductive freedom, abortion access, birth control access, racial disparities in maternal health, et cetera. This summer, we, somewhat, for the most part, cheered the Supreme Court's decision in June Medical, which slapped down an attempt to shut down clinics through targeted restrictions on abortion providers. Those are, of course, trap laws that we are used to dealing with. But then very quickly, of course, we were disappointed by the Trump v. Pennsylvania decision that allows for broad exemptions to the ACA birth control mandate. And of course, on the state level here in Kentucky, the COVID pandemic this year really did derail a lot of the problematic anti-abortion legislation that was headed toward the finish line. But we expect the Republican majority to bring a lot of those back in the next General Assembly. So given all of this, how do you think about the ongoing fight ahead?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that there are a lot of challenges and obstacles, and particularly in Kentucky and Arkansas, Alabama, you all are under siege in terms of the restrictions and the attempts to ban abortion, and just it's an onslaught. It never ends. And so it's hard to feel hopeful, and it's hard to feel like we can have change, but I have to have hope. And I think if we don't have hope, then what are we doing? I can't come to work every day unless I believe, and I do sincerely believe, that we collectively have the power for sustained change. And I think in the movie, Dale Ho talks about, the idea that courts are not going to be what creates that sustained change. We can block things in court. We can hold the line sometimes. We can prevent some bad things from happening in court. But for real sustained change, it's got to come from the public. It's, I'm so heartened by the people in the street protesting for justice, to change the way that police behave, and to protest against the murders of Black and Brown individuals, and are seeking justice for Breonna there in Louisville. It's that kind of public pressure, sustained protest, holding lawmakers accountable, electing lawmakers that are going to enact the right policy. That's what's really going to have change. And so I have hope that we are going to really come to a point on abortion access in this country where everyone is able to get an abortion, everyone can afford one. It's not a question of where you live or how much money you make, that you will be able to get the abortion care that you need without shame and stigma. And that's the vision, and I have hope we're going to get there someday.
All right. We have a few questions that have already come in here, and I want to put a few of them forward here. First one was, I was so inspired by Brigitte and all of the ACLU advocates. So how do you keep up this work without burnout?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, we all love our jobs. We all feel so fortunate and so privileged to be able to do the jobs that we have. We also feel everything very acutely because we know the stakes, we know what's riding on these cases, the ability of people to get the care that they need. And as Heather mentioned, a lot of the work that we do is incredibly time sensitive. We're racing against the clock to make sure that people can get the care that they need, and that the clinic doors stay open. I would say I'm not a workaholic and I'm not a martyr. I take time with my family. I try to find, the ways to decompress and put things into perspective. And I know I can't burn out because we're in this for the long haul. This is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And so when I can turn off my computer and veg out in front of Netflix with a glass of wine, I do. And if I can make it to a ballet class in there, I do that too.
All right. And next question is, what is the ACLU doing to ensure voting rights and making sure that those are protected in November?
Yeah.
I think that could be both.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about just, if I will channel Dale. I've been doing a lot of these panels with my fellow subjects from the film. And so Dale would say, that he's busier than ever right now in the Voting Rights Project, that they have filed, I think, 15 cases since the pandemic to make sure that people can vote safely by mail, and that there's an expansion of voter by mail so that people don't have to choose between appearing in the polls in person during a pandemic and voting. And also now he's rushed back into court on the census question that you see in the movie, that Donald Trump has now trying to say that he is not going to count in the census anyone who is here without documentation. So he's back on an emergency case on the very question in the film. So Heather, I don't know if you want to talk about kind of some local efforts there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, one of those 15 cases was here in Kentucky. So we're working with the National Voting Rights Project on a federal case right now that's pending in the district court here in Louisville. And that case is seeking an expansion of the voter protection measures that were in place for the primary election, including expanded absentee voting and early in-person voting. And we brought that case a couple of months ago in the hopes that it would be early enough that we could get the type of relief that we need for the general election. So that case is still pending, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to use it as a vehicle for some of these voter protection measures. But we are certainly seeking an expanded absentee voting for folks here in Kentucky and early in-person voting too, which of course, the Kentucky voters on this call know we have incredibly restrictive laws in Kentucky generally. And those are just it is not safe to keep voting in November limited to just the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. in-person voting that we normally have here. So that's one thing. And then we actually do have quite a lot of other actions in the works. So we are working with some national groups on election protection issues. There are groups that have been doing election protection across the country for years, and we are joining forces with folks who have set up a hotline, who keep really close attention on a sort of case-by-case basis as to what's happening on the ground. And our advocacy team at the ACLU of Kentucky is also going to be doing a lot of work to ensure that people have access to the polls, and in particular, that Kentuckians who have felony convictions in their background and are now eligible to vote under Governor Beshear's executive order, we're doing a lot of work to make sure that they can access the polls as well. So those are a couple of pieces of what we're doing, and definitely please stay tuned. Certainly on the lawsuit, we'll keep you all posted with how that turns out.
And Brigitte, was Jane Doe able to receive asylum?
So she has not yet received asylum. She's here in the United States with the family members that she wanted to be with. When she turned 18, she could not stay in Office of Refugee Resettlement Care because that's the cutoff. And so we were really worried that they were going to take her into ICE custody. We pushed for her to be released on her own recognizance and to live with family members. And so that's what happens now while she's seeking asylum and special immigration juvenile status, which she can continue to seek until she's 21. So they're both tracks, and she has a great immigration attorney who's helping her, but she has not yet been able to secure asylum or special immigration juvenile status, but she's still trying.
Our next question is, what if Trump makes good on his promise and Roe versus Wade is overturned? What do abortion rights look like in the states once that balancing test is gone, and where do we go from there?
Yeah, it's a great and bleak question. I think if Roe versus Wade is overturned, and I think if Donald Trump is able to appoint another justice to the Supreme Court, that is a possibility. I think right now, with Chief Justice Roberts' recent vote in the June medical case that Heather mentioned, I think that we won't necessarily see an outright overturning of Roe in the current composition of the court, although I think Chief Justice Roberts will vote to uphold other restrictions that will limit access to abortion. But if Roe is overturned, I think that we will see about half the states banning abortions, and I think Kentucky will be one of them, unless something drastically changes in your political landscape in the next couple of years. And I think the infrastructure that already exists to get people to abortion clinics out of state and in various places is already an amazing and a testament to those wonderful organizations that do that work now. And I think that's going to have to be expanded. I think that the reproductive rights, justice, and health community are thinking about what is needed to expand that infrastructure and to get people to where abortions are, and also to use advents in technology like medication abortion and telehealth to reach people, where they are to allow for greater medication abortion.
Okay. What was it like to have your everyday work become the subject of a documentary film, to have it filmed while you did the work?
It was kind of bizarre. And at first I was very guarded. And really the only ground rule that we had with them is that we had to be allowed to kick them out for any attorney-client privileged or work product privileged conversations, which we did all the time. And if they inadvertently captured anything, that could not be shown in the film. So I was really guarded at first, but we built a lot of trust. I mean, they filmed me for almost 3 years, and they really earned our trust. And I did often kick them out of rooms. So I had to be aware of when I needed to shift the conversation and tell them to leave. But I agreed to do it because I thought it was important for the story to be told of what the Trump administration is doing to people and the human suffering that he is causing. And not just for this particular moment, but also in the near future, that hopefully this serves as a cautionary tale of what we can never let our federal government do ever again.
Okay. What difference would federal protections for abortion make, and would states be able to pass trap laws?
So it's a great question. And there's the Women's Health Protection Act right now that is a congressional act that would prevent certain state restrictions like trap laws from being allowed to take effect. So enshrining the federal right to abortion in federal law, not just at the constitutional level, would be a tremendous help. So there are some actions that you can take on the ACLU's website to support the Women's Health Amendment. And that is one vehicle of trying to protect abortion rights.
Okay. So this film really captures four major fights per se, and for civil rights here, and over 400 hours of footage was included in this film. What would you have liked to have had included in this film that didn't show in the work that you were doing?
I mean, it's a great question. I think that for me and for the other subjects, we feel a little sheepish because we are the ones who are featured in the film. But obviously, as Heather mentioned, there are these huge teams that we have that are working on these issues, not just within the ACLU and the national office and our affiliates, but also our sister organizations and other advocates that are helping us. So Rochelle Garza, who was Jane Doe's guardian ad litem, and Jane's due process were both critical people in ensuring that Jane was able to get the care that she needed and not in the film. So I would say that that I would have liked to see more of all of the people involved in all of these fights, and to really tell the picture of how many people it takes to secure rights and just to celebrate all the people who do all of this work.
Okay. Well, we know that you have to go right now and get back to the work that you've been interested to do. We really want to thank again to Brigitte Amiri of ACLU's Reproductive Freedom Project, and to Heather Gatnarek, the staff attorney of the ACLU, for joining us today. If you haven't seen the fight yet, it's still streaming on the virtual Speed Cinema at speedmuseum.org. We want to thank the ACLU, especially Amber Duke, who is their deputy director, for her assistance in setting up today's program here. Please support the ACLU through the ACLU-Kentucky.org. Also, big thanks to the Ona and Ernest Marshall Fund for their great support of today's program, and for the release of this film here in Kentucky too. So thanks to everyone for coming today, and thank you again. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.